This is an Extra 106.3 podcast. To hear more live and local content like this, tune into 106.3 FM or download the Extra 106.3 app. Extra 106.3 and a Second Chance Bail Bonds are here to back your blue. Back Your Blue highlights special initiatives, criminal justice programs, and community events aimed at keeping our communities safer. Join a Second Chance Bail Bond CEO Daniel Matalon and host Tug Coward to learn some good news about and from the law enforcement and justice communities. Now it's time to Back Your Blue on Extra 106.3 FM and the Extra 106.3 app.
Welcome to Back Your Blue on Extra 106.3. My name is Tug Coward, along with Daniel Matalon of A Second Chance Bail Bonds and A Second Chance Monitoring. What's up, man? How are you?
What's going on? Doing well.
We have a quite the lineup today on the show. We have Brian Whidby. He is the Georgia Bureau of Investigation Special Agent in charge of Special Investigations, or Special Agent in charge of Special Investigations and the Cold Case Division. That's a mouthful. Do you print that on a card, or is it too much to go on one card?
Too much on one card.
Just got a bunch of initials.
Special Investigations.
There you go. Okay. All right. There we go. And then we have Christi Canner, GBI Assistant Special Agent in Charge, which Christi also sounds intense. I mean, that sounds like you got quite a job in front of you daily. Am I right about that?
Some days.
Some days?
Some
yeah.
days.
Yeah. Those days seems like it would be like me on a tough day. You know, I fold under the pressure, and when a tough day comes around, like you rise to the occasion. Am I right about that?
I have a great support system.
There we go. Well, I like that. That's smart. I like the way you did that. So, Special Agent in Charge Whidby began his law enforcement career in '97. Prior to employment with the GBI in 2001, assigned to the GBI Region 8 Cleveland Field Office, primarily investigating violent crimes until 2013, then promoted to Special Agent in Charge, the ASAC. I mean, this feels very military all of a sudden when you start using acronyms, right?
A little bit,
It
yeah.
does,
Yeah.
for a guy that was in the Navy. To the GBI Region 10 Atlanta Field Office, served as ASAC for Georgia Information Sharing and Analysis Center, the Georgia Fusion Center from 2018 to 2020, and then the ASAC to the GBI Region 8 Cleveland office from 20 to 22. Goodness, what a list of things that you've been a part of. Did you expect that as a young man that this is where you'd end up? I mean, because everybody dreams of whatever their job's going to be. Was this part of your dream?
Not really. I just sort of fell into it. It's just it piqued my interest going into college, and finished up college and got lucky. Got an internship with a local department in Metro Atlanta, and got hired on with them for a couple of years. Worked locally, worked the road locally, and really wanted to get out of that car and do, have a little more freedom of what I'm doing and hours I was working and things like that. I had a young family at that time.
Yeah.
And, trying to get off the shift work a little bit. Little did I know that the GBI would be even worse for that, because I'd be getting called out in the middle of the night. But it's been great. It's been great. And like you said, started off in North Georgia and Cleveland, where, I think most agents, you think of Metro Atlanta, you think the big cities, but for GBI agents, you learn your craft. You make your bones in the small counties, in the small cities, in North Georgia and South Georgia.
That's where you're working.
Yeah, that's where you're
have
working.
to do a little bit of everything.
That's where you're working most of your violent crimes.
Yeah.
In those places.
And then you were promoted to the Special Agent in Charge of the GBI Special Investigation, responsible for the supervision of the staff, assigned to the statewide unit that conducts both public corruption investigation and cold case investigations. You talked about school. Graduated from Georgia State University, bachelor's in science with a degree in criminal justice in '97, master's of public administration, Columbus State University in 2017. Columbus State University got a good baseball team down there.
They do.
They're always so stinking good. Graduate of the Georgia Law Enforcement Command College and the FBI National Academy in Quantico, Virginia. Goodness gracious. Then it gets deeper and deeper and deeper, because that's close to the federal folks up there, right?
It is. It is. So the FBI National Academy is something that's offered through the FBI. See a lot of, they call it law enforcement executives. Basically, it's the supervision. Then can go to that. It's a 10-week course. You stay in Quantico. It's a lot about networking and getting to know others around the country and internationally. So I have a list I can go on. If I have, if I need a question answered in Kansas,
you know who to call.
I know who to call. I just go on the server and find somebody in Kansas, send it to FBI NA, and give them a call. So it was
Seems
a great
handy.
opportunity. Yeah, it is. It's very handy.
I could use that with like a mechanic.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Just get me a good mechanic. If I could get the Rolodex for that. I don't know about you, Daniel, but I need his Rolodex.
Yeah, it wouldn't be a bad one to have.
No doubt. We'll talk about now Christi Canner, GBI Assistant Special Agent in charge, responsible for supervision of special agents and others within the Office of Special Investigations Unit, responsible for criminal election-related investigations, public corruption investigation, and a newly formed cold case unit. Goodness gracious, how do you do that in a day? That seems like there's a lot there. Do you run across like days that aren't really busy?
Not a sprint, right? It's a marathon.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. When you were a young woman, or even a young girl, was this on your radar screen? Did you know you wanted to work in policing work, but ultimately the GBI?
So I actually went to school for criminal justice and computer science, hoping that I'd get into cyber forensics is what my initial goal was. But then I ended up, and then I ended up going, I started an internship with a local police department with the campus police, actually, and kind of caught the bug. It was just a lot of fun. It was, fast paced. It was just fun, and being able to help, obviously, the community. And then that led me to policing, and I had a supervisor, really great supervisor, who knew my true love was going to be investigations, and he recommended me to go to the GBI.
That's cool.
And so that's how I ended up here.
Is that something that has to be done? Please forgive my ignorance, but is that something that you have to have a recommendation to go to the GBI? Like
No, not at all. No. So he just knew my personality, I think, well enough, and he said,
That's awesome.
you'd be really good at working at the GBI. He knew, GBI is extremely thorough in their paperwork. They're very in depth, and their investigations are very, top tier. And so he said, I think you would really enjoy it.
You fit the bill. I love it. That's
so,
really awesome. So you started out 2010 with the Douglasville Police Department, became a special agent in 2012, crime scene specialist in 2014, and then post-certified instructor and member of the Georgia International Association for Identification. The GIA. Wait, hang on. Did I say that right? GAI. I got it all backwards. GAI. Goodness. I mean, the acronyms are amazing with y'all. Y'all do some incredible acronyms. Man, I can't keep up with them. But graduated from West Georgia, bachelor's in science and criminology, and as you mentioned, computer science, and then went on to the University of Tennessee for National Forensics Academy. Up there, a big Vols fan or no?
No.
Maybe not. No.
No.
Who's your team? How about them dogs? Okay, all right. We'll make sure we're all on the same page here. That's all.
Yeah, she can't work for me and be a Tennessee.
Yeah, exactly. We'll have none of those days, as we have an autographed Georgia helmet sitting here in the room, in Jersey too. It seems like we have some Georgia connections around here at Dickey Broadcasting and Extra 106.3. Daniel, do you oftentimes work with the GBI over at a Second Chance?
Not really. I mean, normally it's on their side of the investigation stuff. I mean, but on the bonding side, no, not particularly.
Yeah. So and is there overlap with like the local municipalities ever?
Oh yeah, they call the GBI. I mean, well, look, if you see on the news, the GBI has been called in for if it's like a death in the jail or like I mean, that's just something that's coming to the top of my head. But I mean, a lot of the sheriffs that I know around the state, obviously, lean on GBI, which I think is great. I mean, some of the newer sheriffs that came in were very forthcoming with wanting to lean on the GBI, and I was like, yeah, absolutely. I mean, as far as transparency goes, because there's a lot of people challenging law enforcement and second guessing. We went through that time period where that was just crazy, and so I mean, very useful and stuff like that.
You know what I know about the GBI? That they walk out on the field with Kirby Smart. That's what I know about the GBI. And you laugh. Like, I would imagine, if I had to guess, that's probably most people's knowledge, or interaction. Hopefully that's most people's interaction, is just seeing them on TV and not having to interact personally. But I would imagine, though, when people see y'all out, it's because the GBI always looks so sharp, the uniforms are so distinct. What's the interaction with the public like, usually?
Sure. Well, I have to go back a little bit. That's the State Patrol.
Oh, that's right. You're right. Oh, my gosh. State Patrol. What am I saying? So I know nothing about the GBI. So right there. Yeah, it's just right over the top of my head. You're right. So what's the relationship with the public like at the GBI?
I think it's good. I hope it is. We try to, maintain that that stance of, hey, we're open, we're transparent, come talk to us if need be. But the general I guess how we interact with the public. Normally you're really not seeing a GBI agent unless something bad's happened, right? We don't particularly have a uniform. We have a shirt that says GBI on it.
Sure.
If you see somebody out working a crime scene or somebody's been called out, but normally we're in, regular, casual dress or something like that. So, GBI is strictly major felony cases. Yeah. So. And we assist the local agencies, like you alluded to earlier. I mean, basically, we're free labor for the sheriffs, for the local police departments to come out and help them if need be.
Yeah,
I take that back. We do. So yes, active cases that we have on bond, absolutely. If there's new crimes, major felonies, like he's talking about, some of the major stuff, or if we have a person on monitor, or they just want information, right? So GBI will reach out to us and say, hey, you've bonded this guy out 4 times since 2020. What information do you have if they're looking for him? Which, of course, we always, I'm a big believer in helping law enforcement and stuff like that. But, GBI is great.
That's fascinating. I'm so fascinated by what y'all do and know nothing. Again, like I said, know absolutely nothing about it. So when we come back, I want to talk about the GBI cold case unit, like when it started.
Sure.
Some of the things that, the cold cases when it comes to like homicides and missing persons that, obviously, you can't go into detail, but the things that you're doing right now, because I would only imagine that people would be fascinated, just like me, to hear about some of this stuff when we continue with Brian Whidby and Christi Canner of the GBI here on Back Your Blue on Extra 106.3.
This is Back Your Blue, presented by A Second Chance Bail Bonds, live on Extra 106.3 FM and streaming for free anytime on the Extra 106.3 app.
Welcome back to Back Your Blue on Extra 106.3. My name is Tug Coward, along with Daniel Madelon of A Second Chance Bail Bonds and A Second Chance Monitoring. We also have Brian Whidby. He is Georgia Bureau of Investigation, Special Agent in charge of Special Investigations and Cold Case Division. That's a mouthful. Goodness gracious. And then Christi Canner, GBI Assistant Special Agent in charge. When we stopped during the break, we were just talking about how what y'all do is almost like a TV show. And then we get to talking a little more, but it kind of is. And maybe if you've seen Will Trent, some of those shows like that. Why is the work y'all do so fascinating and shows up on TV like that, do you think?
I don't know, but people do have a fascination with it, and they, it's entertainment value to it, I guess, as well. But it is interesting. I've been doing this for going on 28 years now, so it's got to be a little bit interesting.
Yeah,
to stay with it that long,
to stick with it. Yeah,
not many people stay around that long.
Yeah, so it's interesting. It's always something different. It's always something new. So I think that's part of the fascination with it. Is you never know what you're going to get. Each day's different. Each case is different, and you meet a pretty large cross section of the public.
Yeah, of course,
doing this kind of work.
No doubt. Christi, you said that in your spare time you actually help some of because Atlanta's the Hollywood of the South. You actually help some of the people that are putting together TV shows make things more realistic. How did you get involved with that, and what do you do?
So another crime scene specialist that I've worked with for years recommended me to go do that, and that actually was a recommendation to join, help the show, and it's in their crime scene perspective. So if they have blood stains, in their scene, how to make them look more real, or they're collecting evidence or processing evidence, or sometimes even like the chases in the scenes just to make it look more realistic of what a police officer would actually do. So sometimes if it's, somebody's running down the hallway, at what point do you draw your weapon? Those types of questions.
Cow.
So we're there just to kind of help them make it more realistic.
I see this, and the reason I brought this up is my wife watches a TV show called Virgin River. I don't know if y'all know this one or not. So it's awful. Don't watch it if you've not.
My wife watches it. I do not.
Yeah. You've done yourself a favor by not watching it. So my brother-in-law, retired Air Force. I have another brother-in-law, retired Marine Corps. I've got an Army. I was Navy. I didn't retire. I spent 4 years. But there was a scene at the end of this season where the two main characters are getting married, and one is in a military, a Marine uniform, and my brother-in-law picked it apart. That's the only enjoyment he got out of the entire TV show, is saying that wouldn't happen, that's not real, that's not within regs. I mean, he was just tearing it apart. So they need somebody like you, Christi, to be able to guide them and point them in the right direction, because people who are in the military, and I would imagine people in the GBI or other organizations, other police organizations, when they see something like that on a TV show, they'd be like, that's not the way it would work. That's not the way it would happen. So making that more realistic is such a cool thing, because most of the time it's not.
Very true.
Yeah. They get it wrong, Brian, more than they ever get it right.
Yeah, like I said, my wife watches that show, but she watches the other shows, the police shows, the murder shows, the things like that, and she can't watch them with me because, like you said, we're picking them apart. And,
right.
Especially, they're walking into a crime scene and it's dark.
Yeah.
In a house with flashlights.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you walked by 4 light switches. Turn the lights on, dude.
It's hard to pick up on evidence if you don't look at it.
How about just turn the lights on?
That's right.
It's little stuff like that.
That's so true. I remember. You remember the movie Seven?
Oh, yeah.
Was it Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman?
Yeah.
Every room was dark. It was always flashlights, and it was always raining. It's just, you're like, come on, dude, flip on a light, man. What are you doing?
Turn the light switch on.
So, Daniel, you've probably seen stuff like this before on television.
Yeah,
I'm not an expert on anything, much less policing, and probably would have thought that, hey, man, this light switch right there, maybe turn that thing on and see what you can find. I bet we can solve this case quicker if we're able to see. I don't know, maybe. Let's talk about the history of the GBI Cold Case Unit. When did it start?
So July 23 is when we stood up the unit.
Of 2023? Like just
recently.
Dude,
we're like a year and a half old.
Yeah, a year and a half ago.
Yeah, we're a year and a half old. So, the GBI, the way we're set up, we have 15 regional offices throughout the state, and then specialized units as well, drug offices, child crimes, human trafficking, things like that. But all the homicide cases, all the death investigations are worked out of the regional offices, the 15 regional offices throughout the state. And the GBI does not close unsolved homicide cases, so they're still open. So we have homicide cases from 1970, going forward in some of our offices. And we saw the need for it, just the funding wasn't there yet, right? But, and like I said earlier, a lot of my time was spent in a regional offices working those homicide cases. And it ebb and flows. It's, when you're a working agent in the office, you can see you'll get 2 or 3 homicides in a row, and you're working those, and you're spending all your hours and time on those cases, and then you'll get in that downturn where it's not that busy. So then you're able to pick up those unsolved cases and look at those, start working those. But the problem is, you look at them, you refresh yourself, you start working them, you start doing interviews, and then you get a new one. Well, you got to put the unsolved down, right? So because you got to work the one in front of you. So. We were fortunate at the GBI. The Coleman-Baker Act was passed, and driving force behind the Coleman-Baker Act were the families of 2 homicide victims in the state of Georgia, Rhonda Sue Coleman and Tara Baker. Rhonda Sue Coleman, high school student in South Georgia, who was tragically killed 20 years ago, and then Tara Baker, again, about 20 years ago. She was a law student at UGA. So their families got together with some members of the legislature, put together a cold case law. So it's the Coleman-Baker Act. luckily with that, and we thank the legislature and the governor for putting this together and signing this into law. Along with this mandate came the funding for the GBI to stand up the cold case unit. So we were able to stand up the cold case unit. We have 10 agents statewide working cold cases with supervision, with the intelligence staff working with us as well. So, and these agents, a lot of the supervision out of the regional offices aren't happy with me right now because I took some really good agents for this, and you have to have that. These are agents that are proven. They know how to work homicide cases. They rose to the top. They were selected specifically for their, I guess their acumen in working these kind of cases. Sure. So we were lucky to get a good staff, good agents working these cases for us.
Is it common for, I guess, around the country? Is this new for most agencies, or is it Georgia was a little late to the game, or how do you see that?
I don't want to say late to the game, but there are other state agencies that have it. A lot are. It's the new thing, really. Is working the cold cases and actually having a specific unit that does that. There's a lot of advancement that has come along with forensic evidence technology that's allowed us to try to solve some of these cases. Yeah. So not really late to the game, just because we've always worked them, right? Yeah. We just hadn't had that specialized unit to do it. Yeah. Now we have, and we're full speed ahead.
That's unbelievable. Last year, or in the last 18 months, what has been the solve rate? Or is that a silly question to ask?
No.
How many have you figured out now that have gone cold? And
so it's a cold case. It's cold for a reason, right? Because it's not easy. It's not easy to solve.
Sure, of course. I don't expect the number to be big, but I mean, just any.
Yeah. So we do have one, and we'll talk about it, but I want to sort of go back a little bit to how we get these, right? So the public and victims' families can request a Coleman-Baker Act review from the GBI or their local agency. When they do that, we look at it, we accept that case. If it's a GBI case, we're going to accept it, right? But not only, we're taking cases that haven't been requested through the Coleman-Baker Act, they're just GBI cases, right? So we've gone to the regional office and said, what do you have? Let's see what you have. Let's go through it. Let's take it. But it takes time. You're talking about minimum probably 6 months for that agent to pick up the case, to read it, to digest it, to understand it, to go through the evidence before they're even doing the first interview, right? So it's a long process
I can imagine.
To get through it. Now, since that 18 months, one of the cases that we picked up immediately, well, two of them were Rhonda Sue Coleman, Tara Baker. Mm-hmm. We had some really good luck with the Tara Baker case out of Athens. We got it assigned, worked with our regional office in Athens, worked with the Athens-Clarke County Police Department and the GBI's forensic division. We were able to solve that case, make an arrest after over 20 years.
Wow.
And that, I don't remember exactly when we arrested him, Christi. It was back late summer.
It was May 9th, I believe.
Yeah, so May 9th of last year. So
with the exact date? That's a good pull there.
It was a big day.
I can't remember my anniversary. You're pulling cold cases, It's amazing.
Yeah, so it's a big day. I mean, you think about it, Tara Baker, she's one of the namesakes of the law. We were able to pick that case up, go through it, find a couple of things, run with it, and actually make that arrest.
I mean, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
What was the mood like in the GBI when that happened? I mean, you had to be beaming with pride. There had to be lots of pats on the back, and holy cow, we did it.
Oh, yeah. It was great. But again, it was a partnership with our regional office, Athens-Clarke County.
Of course. All the people involved.
Yeah. I mean, everybody was ecstatic. Everybody was happy.
That's amazing.
For us, just bringing that, closure's a strange word, but actually
that's what it is.
It's some closure for the family. They're never going to get over the loss of their loved one, but, bringing some closure, letting them know that, that we're still here, still working on the case, and
still care.
And still care, right. Absolutely.
I mean, that's the biggest thing I would imagine. Christi, you can tell me what you think, but people respond to the fact that you cared enough to try. And even if, there's others that don't finish this way and they stay cold, the fact that you cared enough to try, I would imagine, is more than most of those families have been able to experience when it comes to the person that they love, that they lost.
Sure. Yeah, I think, and one of the things that we really push for is communication with the family. And that is one of the biggest things. Our agents, when they get the case, they're in communication with the family, letting them know. And it's not always a good news situation, right? We might call them up every couple of weeks or once a month and say, hey, we're still here. We're still working. We don't have anything yet, but we're still in communication. And I think that that's key for the families, knowing that we're still working this. We're still, trying everything that we can. And that also goes to, I feel like, our process that we have created, in our unit is fantastic. The way that we take cases, the thorough review, which is why we have senior agents, doing these. They know kind of what to look for, what's fallen through the cracks maybe, and then looking at all of the evidence. And we also have taken some senior crime scene specialists from throughout the state too, which also didn't make some folks happy. Right? Yeah, but having these senior, crime scene folks also to be able to look at this evidence and see what's been done, what hasn't been done, what can still be done, and then in partnership with obviously our lab, our crime lab, they can look and say, hey, we've got new technology here. We might be able to try this, or we might be able to try that, and so. They are really, a significant part of, us trying to get these cases worked too.
We're going to come back to process in a minute because, Daniel, I bet y'all have a serious process from start to finish on how you do bail bonds and how you do monitoring.
Yeah, and we have to find these people also, because if not, then I'm writing a big check to whichever government agency.
Yeah.
So, and we've had only 2 that have gotten away forever that I'm still looking for.
You got cold cases.
Yes.
You got your own cold cases.
Unfortunately, I do, and I'll never forget these people because it just really irritates me.
Seared in your mind forever and ever. That's amazing. How did you come up with your processes? But I know you've been at it a long time, but is it trial and error, or did you
we went in-house where most bonding agencies around the country outsource their investigators, where we have in-house investigations. And then we work obviously with marshals and just different people throughout Metro Atlanta and stuff like that. But I'm all about, because if the person doesn't show up for court, then there's no case. So then the investigators have wasted years, time, sometimes months, hours, whatever it is, to bring the case. So my job is to make sure they show up. Not everybody has that same thought process, but I'm a big believer in that. So we try to make sure these people are there, so that way when these investigations are happening, it's not for nothing.
Anybody that doesn't buy into that process, man, I'm questioning.
You'd be surprised.
I'm just saying. Let's go back to process for y'all. When you talked about the process of, did y'all come up with a process, or was it just wisdom that you've gained over the years? How did that develop? How was it developed?
Right.
The process of would you call it prosecuting a cold case or investigating a cold case? That'd be the better way to put it.
Yeah, I think it's the investigation. There's been some tried and true methods that the GBI has used for years. We took those. We came up with our own ideas. I'm not ashamed to say it. We stole some ideas from other agencies.
For sure.
If that's what it takes, then that's what we'll do. But like I said, the GBI had a process of what we do. We looked at what other agencies are doing, talked to them, incorporated that into what we could do, what we were doing, what worked best for us. And a lot of that is, initially that initial read of the file, digesting that. And one thing I stressed and wanted to stress is the evidence. Looking back at what evidence do you have? What evidence do you still have? Where is it? Let's find it.
Is that a problem?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, it's a problem. It can be, because you think about it. Some of these cases happened in the 80s, right? Some go back to the 70s.
So how do you process that stuff? Like, let's say it's DNA or whatever it is you guys are running back now.
Right. So, and that's the thing. You got to find it first, right? Let's just say we have a sweater, from a victim. We've got to find it first. Then we've got to look at it and see, where has it been? How has it been kept? And then it all leads to one thing I wanted to stress was incorporating the state lab, the GBI crime lab, into our investigations and bringing them with us, sitting down with them one-on-one. This is what we have. What can we do with it? Because they're the experts in the scientific part of it. And so that's one thing we do is we find all the evidence, categorize all the evidence. This is what we have. Sit down with the lab and go, okay, what can we do now? There's things that our lab can do. There's certain things our lab can't do. and we're able to send that to private labs as well. So we're partnering with some private labs as well for what they can do that maybe our lab can't do at the moment. Some of that is just technology that these private labs have that we don't necessarily have right now. Some of it's, cost restraints that we can use outside labs.
Okay.
Because, the GBI crime lab, they service the entire state, right? Sure. Not just us. So
they're relatively busy, I guess.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, a little bit. So, sometimes to move to the front of the line, we might use a private lab, or, we might try to pull some strings to get to the front of the line with our lab. But really partnering with our crime lab, they've been great. And going through the evidence of what's there, because the big thing now is, and you mentioned it earlier, is DNA. Not every case has got DNA in it, unfortunately, or if it did,
or the evidence isn't valuable or usable.
Right, maybe it's not usable anymore. Yeah. Right, so a lot of these cases come down to the agent and who's working it, and that's why we were so selective of who joined the unit, because this is a self-motivated, self-driven kind of investigation, because it's 20 years old, right? Yeah, that one family member's out there that's pushing you, but it's not in the news anymore. It's 20 years old. You've got to connect with the victim. You've got to connect with the family and really push yourself to, to do the investigation and to do it right.
Have you ever been on the cusp of what you thought was solving a cold case, and it came down to, like, the DNA evidence wasn't kept well and it had been moved around, or whatever the reason, you didn't feel confident that you could use this because of how it was handled way back when, and you're like, if they would have just saved that one piece of evidence, I know this would have been solved?
Yeah.
Have you've been there?
Yeah, it happened 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. Yeah, so we got some results back, and we looked at it, and we were all happy, and we took it to the lab and talked to the lab, and they're like, yeah, not so much.
Oh, my gosh.
So, yeah.
All of that work.
Yeah, I mean,
it's like you're on, like, you can see the finish line, and then somebody just takes the finish line and takes it away from you. Yeah, the finish line is gone.
Yeah, just destroyed it. Yeah, absolutely. But it was not, those were the processes back then. In 1985, I wasn't in this business then, but in 1985, if these guys knew what was going to happen in 2025, you just don't.
They would have done it differently.
See the
there's no way to know. There's no way to know what you don't know.
Yeah, right.
And the changes in technology.
Who knew 15 years ago that law enforcement was going to be using genetic genealogy to track down suspects? Very few, if any.
Explain that a little bit, because I bet people have heard that on a TV show or have heard that somewhere, but don't really know what that is. Can you explain it?
Well, I'll give you the layman's terms of it. Yeah, the Cliff Notes. I mean, basically, it's if you have DNA, right, first of all, and you have unknown suspect DNA. So let's say we have a murder with a sexual assault, and the suspect left his or her DNA there in that sexual assault. You can take that DNA. It's unknown. You run it through our normal systems, and it doesn't come back to anybody. So this person's never been in prison where they had to, they were mandated to give up their DNA, right? So it's not hitting in CODIS where we keep our where DNA is stored for violent felons. So there are private labs that will develop that DNA into what they call a SNP profile, and that can be used for markers for genetic genealogy. So you can build out a family tree and get to your right suspect.
Holy cow.
Now, that is a laborious, long process.
Yeah, it's not done in a 30-minute TV show.
No, it's done over...
It's like they do it in a 30-minute TV show.
Probably 30 months. Yeah, and it depends on how good the DNA is, how good the markers are in the DNA. And, there's certain folks where it works well at. There's certain folks where it doesn't, and it just takes extra time. And you're talking about, you'll start with I don't know the proper term, but a fifth, third cousin, and you've got to work your way,
buddy,
to that right, oh my God, that right family tree, that right branch.
I love it.
So
my cousin Curtis is my fifth, third cousin.
There you go. So
and
that's the thing is, and a lot of that comes into. So, the folks out there have to cooperate with us as well. When you have somebody walk to your door and say, I'm with the GBI, I'm investigating this homicide.
Yeah, shut down immediately.
Can I have your DNA?
No.
No.
Yeah.
A lot of people are like,
call
no.
my lawyer. I'll get back to
exactly.
you.
So,
have you? How often do people say no? Probably always.
it's probably 50.
We've had
50.
It was mixed.
Okay.
Yeah,
it's been mixed.
It's a little surprising to me, to be honest.
Yeah.
Well, when you think about it, though, it goes back to the TV shows. The people are interested.
Yeah.
They're interested in, they watch it on TV, they see it on TV, so they're interested. And I think most people are genuinely good people. They want to help.
Yeah, I think.
Right? Especially if you explain to them, this is what we're doing. You are not a suspect. Yeah. This may be somebody, 5 branches away from you in your family tree that you don't even know.
Right.
So... it depends on the person, but genuinely, most people, they want to help.
So fascinating.
Yeah.
How does also, like, in times where, like, you're going in one direction, then it literally, like, that person didn't commit that crime, but then they were tied to, like, other stuff, right? I mean, that you get a lot of that. You get some of that stuff too, right?
Could be. Absolutely.
What a huge puzzle.
Yeah.
What a huge puzzle. When we continue, I want to ask you: is DNA ever wrong? Next on Back Your Blue on Extra 106.3 with Daniel Madelon of A Second Chance Bail Bonds and A Second Chance Monitoring, as well as Brian Whidby, Christi Canner of the GBI. Next on Extra 106.3.
Extra 106.3 and A Second Chance Bail Bonds are here to back your blue. Now back to the show on Atlanta's only conservative news and talk station, Extra 106.3.
Welcome back to Back Your Blue on Extra 106.3. My name is Tug Coward, along with Daniel Madelon of A Second Chance Bail Bonds and A Second Chance Monitoring, as well as Brian Whidby and Christi Canner of the GBI. I asked the question before we ended that last segment, is DNA ever wrong? Is the evidence ever wrong? Because it seems like that's the end-all, be-all. That's the key to every case. Is it ever wrong?
So that's definitely for a scientist to answer.
Okay.
But there are definitely things we deal with, like degradation of samples.
Got it.
And we're dealing with cold cases. So some of this evidence has been around for 20, 30 years. And if it wasn't stored properly, then that's a possibility, right? It could have been degrading over years. Like, we don't put biological samples into plastic, right? It's no different than putting a peanut butter and jelly sandwich in a plastic bag, and you
Going
forget
back 30
about
years.
it. You forget about it, and you come back, and it's completely covered in mold.
Yeah.
Right. So we have had that, or you've got samples that weren't, stored properly, and then you see that there's mold, and so and mold obviously is killing your DNA. So those problems, sure. And then we talked about evidence and what we can test and what is still available for testing. Mm-hmm. One of the things we look at is what was it tested for before. And so sometimes, if it were already in the lab and opened, some of the processes, like in, say, firearms, they don't always use gloves. That's typically the very last process that happens to a piece of evidence is firearms. And so because of that, if it's been, let's just say, a random piece of evidence, but let's say a cartridge casing goes to the firearms and they've handled it with, just bare hands, then, if we look at that and we know that happened, then there's probably a good chance it's going to be cross-contaminated at that point. So we're going to have multiple individuals, DNA on that. So all of these things. So that's why we create a spreadsheet and we log every single piece of evidence and where it's been and every crime lab report that we can find. And then there's also physical markers too, right? If we get the packaging, you can tell if it's the original packaging or not, because all of the processes, like once it goes to the lab, there's different, things that they do. They open it in a different spot, use different tape and their initials. So we can check in a variety of ways to see what evidence we're dealing with.
Goodness gracious. It's stuff like that is, again, that people are just, they hear about it, they read about it, they see it on TV, and then Daniel, to have the expert be able to answer the question. That's what this show's about, man.
Yeah,
getting the real questions. I feel like it's Inspector Gadget today. What about solving those cold cases? How many of y'all been able to solve it? Are there any statistics that you'd like to share that can give people perspective?
Yeah, so, we've been around, a unit for about a year and a half. Our unit thus far, in that year and a half, we've solved one. It was a big one.
That was a big one.
It was a
big
one.
The one we talked about earlier.
Yeah. The Tara-Baker case. We're close on some other ones.
Wow.
I think we've got 3 to 5 right now that I think we're waiting on some crime lab reports that we're really high on. We think it's going to have some good leads for us. Mm-hmm. I know one right now in Northeast Georgia that we're waiting on one crime lab report, and I think we're ready to go.
I don't think my mouth has dropped to the table as many times as it has in this show ever. Like every time you say something, I'm more blown away by what you're saying. It's so fascinating to me. So, what about the community? Can the community help the GBI?
Absolutely. I mean, I think cooperating and talking to us when we come to you, that's the biggest thing. Is, it may be this, this 50-something-year-old guy that comes to your door and knocks on the door, which is me, and
some devil
just says, "Hey, I want to talk to you about something that happened 20 years ago," and sitting down and talking with us. That's the biggest thing. And if if they know something, to actually come forward and let us know. That's the big part of it. Is, and we want the public to know that we're here. We're working on
and a
these
force
cases.
For good.
Absolutely, absolutely. And one thing we sort of talked about when we first started the unit is, why are we here, right? And it's for the victims and their families, and to let them know. And one thing, sort of our motto is not forgotten. And the victim is not forgotten. That family is not forgotten. And that's what we're here for, to make sure that those family members know that, your loved one that was the victim of a violent crime, that were killed however long ago, that hadn't been forgotten. We're here to help. And like you said, a force for good. I like that, is to really to put these things to bed and solve some of these cases.
Yeah,
because that's a tough place to be, being
so
the victim side of 10 years, 20. I mean, and I have been exposed to something in this realm myself personally, but so I know how critical that piece is like. And you think about just waking up every day like wondering if and when. So I think this is awesome that you guys are doing this. I'm super happy about it.
Oh my gosh,
it's great.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And that's the thing, is connecting with the family. And we stressed it from day one, and we continue, is stay in touch with the family, because, for 20 years, these families have gone from investigator to investigator to investigator.
Yep.
Right?
That's it.
Because people leave
down the line.
And it continues to go down the line. I've had cases when I was working agent and the regional office where you can look back at the file and it's had 10 agents assigned to it over 20 years, over 30 years. So we're putting one agent there. You are the contact. It is your responsibility to stay in touch with the family, and that's huge for us. Is just to let them know that we're here. We're not going anywhere. The unit's not going anywhere. It's built to last. And however many years I'll be gone, and Christi or Justin's one of the other ASACs that's not here today. One of them will take it over and keep running with it.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So I had a case actually that I was involved with, that it was the GBI phone dump that actually gave us, and this case was started in 2015. It had been going on for about 5 years. And literally it was 4 years in that we actually realized that the GBI phone dump had photo images that other police departments, not knocking, but neglected to see. And it was that GBI phone dump that led to guilty convictions in a case that so and I can firsthand speak to that. So you guys do great work. So I'm forever grateful to GBI. But the Cole case I'm excited to see what you guys.
Yeah, stuff like that, like you just said, can get missed easy.
It was literally, and I got the phone call and they said, "You're never gonna believe," and I said, "I knew it. It had to be there, or what they were looking for," and it came in the GBI phone dump.
Yeah, I mean, stuff like that can get missed easily in that initial investigation, because you're going from lead to lead to lead, and especially if it's a big case, if it's high profile. Yeah. There's a lot of eyes and there's a lot of people involved, and it can just it doesn't look like it means something then, but you go back 5, 10, 15 years later and you look at it and go, what about this?
Get a new set of eyes.
And it literally, that's what this was. It was a new set of eyes, and then it was like, oh, no, wait a second. We have this. Because what happens was they deleted the photos. Well, then when the GBI did their download in their phone dump, then they were like, they found the little, it's like a little square. Yeah, like a little thumbnail. And then it's like, no, this is it. And that was the smoking gun. I mean, that was literally the photo that we were looking for.
Okay, we just wrote our own TV show. We're about to be rich. We're about to be rich, y'all.
I love it.
You gonna retire early.
There you go.
I love it. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you for what you do.
Absolutely.
And I hope it won't be the last time that we get to talk to y'all. because everything you say is so fascinating. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
With the Brian and Christi from the GBI, Daniel Madelon from A Second Chance Bail Bonds and A Second Chance Monitoring. My name is Doug Cowart. This is Extra 1063.
This is an Extra 1063 podcast. To hear more live and local content like this, tune into 1063 FM or download the Extra 1063 app.